my great pleasure to welcome you to the first event of the STEM Women series here in Rwanda. On behalf of the World Bank and our co-organizers, Carnegie Mellon University Africa and the African Development Bank, I thank you all for honoring our invitation in person and online. We are in an interesting moment here in Rwanda when our three organizations are being led by dynamic African women or women of African descent. I introduce to you my sisters, Aissa Toure Sarr, the country manager of the African Development Bank, and Bemi Disu, executive director of the Carnegie Mellon University Africa. What better way to use our collective power than to join forces to establish a platform where we can celebrate African female role models and inspire young Africans, particularly girls, to pursue education and careers in STEM. I am most grateful to our panelists, the Honorable Minister of State, Claudette, Dr. Franny Lettier, and Ms. Lucy Bazi, for gracing this event and agreeing to share with us their journeys as accomplished leaders and African women with STEM backgrounds. What is STEM in education and why is it important? STEM stands for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, but it goes well beyond the individual subjects taught in classrooms. A STEM education nurtures a way of thinking and doing. It provides vital skills like problem solving and critical thinking that are beneficial both in and out of the workplace. In this moment, when the developing world is confronting great complexity, generating sustainable economic growth and necessary improvements in the standards of living will rely heavily on innovation and technology. And this is where a STEM education will be an invaluable asset. A recent article from the Brookings Institute in Washington, D.C., entitled "Making the Future of African STEM Female," posits that revolutions can only happen for Africa if there is active participation in STEM at all levels of education, especially for girls. It acknowledges that while women comprise half the population, they are underrepresented in STEM careers. By way of example, a mere 18 to 31% of science researchers in Africa are women, as compared to 49% in the Caribbean, where I am from, and 37% in Arab states. Notably, at primary school, girls perform as well as or better than boys. Globally, in mathematics and in science, however, only 3 to 7%, small number of girls who attend higher education study STEM-related courses when they get there. In Rwanda today, less than a third of the students who study STEM subjects are female. In the field of engineering and medicine, this disparity is even more vivid. Only 16% of engineering and 20% of medical graduates are female. Research has shown that several factors contribute to this underrepresentation of women in STEM. There are negative stereotypes about girls' and women's capability in STEM fields, discrimination against women and girls in the classroom and workplace, and traditional gender roles that place the burden of domestic responsibilities disproportionately on the shoulders of women and girls, leaving them less time to study, work in laboratories, attend conferences, and build invaluable networks. Over the years, some girls and women, especially here in this continent, have been made to believe that STEM is an exclusively male domain, discouraging adages like "a woman's place is in the kitchen," or "women are to be seen and not heard," have affected women's and girls' interests in education in general, not to mention in STEM fields, thus denying them the benefits it offers in life and in the job market. Together, we need to take bold steps to close this achievement gap and ensure appropriate representation for women in STEM fields. This will increase creativity, innovation, and gender-sensitive perspectives on problem solving in development and in industry. One sure way of closing the achievement gap is by using role models. Research shows that girls learn better in a collaborative and non-competitive environment, and that they can be inspired by connecting with role models in STEM careers that can serve as mentors and as examples of success stories. This can encourage girls and women to excel. Our raison d'être here today. Further, there is power in numbers. Not nearly enough of the innovative young thinkers and entrepreneurs that are gaining prominence in Africa are women. More girls in STEM education means more women in STEM careers, building camaraderie to tackle the hurdles that are affecting African women and girls today. We commend the government of Rwanda for their efforts and commitment to ensure access and uptake of STEM programs, and for the collaboration with the World Bank and other development partners to invest in improved learning environments, establish centers of excellence that cultivate interest in science and technology, and nurture the next generation of STEM-educated leaders that will catalyze change in the public, private, and academic domains. To the students, I hope that our bet pays off and that you will be inspired and energized by this series. I hope that you will work harder to make your community, your families, and your country proud as you engage in STEM education and advance to STEM careers. In closing, I visited the Women's Pavilion at the World Expo in Dubai recently. One part of the exhibit was solely dedicated to women's contributions to science, another to women leaders in politics the world over. It was an awe-inspiring experience to see the collection of outstanding women leaders and their contributions. And I want to just share with you a few lines from that exhibit that resonated with me. When women lead, society thrives. Women leaders are more likely to create a collaborative environment and represent the needs of communities. Their input has a positive impact on policymaking, creating opportunities to improve well-being and quality of life. I know that when African STEM women lead, the continent and the world will thrive. You will know that too, after hearing from our distinguished panelists today. Murakoze Chane. Bemi, over to you.
Murakoze Roland, thank you very much. Moraho Neza, Nitwa Bemi Disu, and I'm Executive Director at Carnegie Mellon University Africa. Thank you all for being part of today's inaugural STEM Women Lead series, both here in the audience, as well as those joining us around the world virtually. Today's event started as a simple idea from conversations with like-minded women about advancing our collective passion and commitment to gender equity. As the African proverb goes, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. I would once again like to thank Roland and Isa for their collaboration in helping to make today's event a reality so that we can all go further together on this really relevant issue. As many of you may already know, this month we celebrate both Women's History Month in the United States, as well as International Women's Day on the 8th of March. And what better way to kick it off than to celebrate with today's dynamic and diverse female leaders who are going to speak with you today. I am very excited to welcome our distinguished panelists, whose achievements, both professionally and personally, certainly inspired me, and I have no doubt will do the same for you. First, I would like to welcome Honorable Minister Claudette Irerae to the stage. Honorable Minister Claudette Irerae was appointed Minister of State in charge of ICT and TVET of the Republic of Rwanda in February 2020. This position was reinstated as the government moves to streamline and strengthen TVET education and ICT integration in teaching and learning. Prior to her current position, she was the permanent secretary in the Ministry of ICT and Innovation. A round of applause once again for Honorable Minister. Next, I'd like to welcome Ms. Lucy Umba Bazi to the stage. Ms. Umba Bazi leads Africa advocacy and partnerships at the UN Better Than Cash Alliance to make digital payments work for every African, working with regional and continental partners based in Kigali, Rwanda. Before joining UNCDF, she worked for the Rwandan Development Board, Visa, EcoBank Transnational Inc., where she led payment solutions for the group covering 33 African countries based in Lomé, Togo. Welcome once again to Ms. Last but not least, I'd like to welcome Dr. Franny Lettier virtually. Dr. Lettier is the senior partner at Southbridge Group and CEO of Southbridge Investments. And she has a longstanding global experience leading and transforming organizations in the private, public, and non-for-profit sectors. Dr. Lettier has an illustrious career at the World Bank Group, where during her 15-year tenure, she held various senior financial positions across the group. A round of applause for Lucy. Great. Now that everyone's here, I'm just going to have us start by having you explain what got you interested in studying STEM and what challenges did you encounter? How did you overcome those? So I'll start with the Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Baimi, and thanks for having me today. What got me into STEM? I would say my mother. It's a story, and I think all the students here might find themselves in this story. When it was time for me to choose what I was going to do at the advanced level, I sat down with my mother and we were weighing the options. Apparently I was good in arts, so history, geography, and all those other things, but I was also good in sciences. And so we were weighing the pros and cons. If I do arts and if I do science, what will happen later? And so, the prospects first of getting a scholarship were high. Before it was not even, they were not even called loans. Today they're called loans. But before it was government scholarships, they were high if I did science. The prospects of getting a job once I am done were also equally high. And I had, a bonus reason for me to do sciences. All the students here, mainly high school students, probably would know this. I had very bad acne, pimples all over my face. And I was not feeling good about that. And I would go see a doctor, a skin doctor, and they would administer things, creams and things to put. And then I decided I would do science, become a doctor, specialize in dermatology, and treat myself and be able to treat others as well. Unfortunately, that did not happen. But that was the main reason I got into this. So when we weighed, down with my mother, we were like, okay, let's do science. So I did science eventually, and I wanted to become a doctor. Fate has it that I didn't become a doctor, obviously, you can tell. But I want to talk about something very important, the versatility that comes with studying science. And I remember discussing with my mother, and it was like, the basics that you gain from studying sciences are not equal to what you'll gain if you study the other things. And so, and I've seen it. Yes, when I finished and I could not become a doctor, I was able to do computer science. Later on, did computer and electrical engineering. Again, think about the versatility for someone who had done just biology and chemistry, and of course, the physics and mathematics. But that versatility, and when I finished, was not necessarily put into programming careers, but now I'm here speaking to you as the Minister of State. And people that were with me the other day, I've been part of these conversations around vaccine manufacturing. You know, there's a plant that is coming, that is being established in Rwanda in the near future. And I'm able to have these conversations and understand what they're talking about because of the basics that I received with the choice that I made at the time. So that's how I got into science. And yes, the challenges, I would not say I mean, at least on my path, they were not so many. Apart from, you know, sciences is not for women, you know, you could have done this, you could do this better. But the rest, I think, I've been in a nurturing environment all throughout and until today. And I'm very grateful for that. And I hope for the women, the young ladies in the room, I hope you are equally in nurturing environments that allow you to become the best that you can be and do science as well. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Minister.
I wanted to be a pediatrician, and I did study the sciences, and then I took a visit to the children's hospital. But as soon as I walked in, I just started crying because of the pain and the sickness and the suffering. And so my mentor said, but if you walk in on the first day and you're just bawling, I don't know that you can really do this on a daily basis. So I went through the week and I just knew that this is too much pain for me to handle. I need to figure out another way that I can, you know, solve problems, because I thought as a pediatrician, at least I can solve children's problems. And that's how I ended up in the technology track. And it's such an exciting way to, whether it's solving a problem, creating a smiley face, you know, I see all these emojis that, you know, I'm sure many people here use. All that is what we do in programming, and, you know, so all the ways that you can apply technology in whatever sector. That's why it's you know, sciences, engineering, math. I loved math particularly. Cross-cutting. You could walk into a farm, you could go into a hospital, you could go to a school, you could go anywhere, and you find a way to apply those zeros and ones that we, you know, because it's always, okay, so there's this problem, how do we fix it? Even if it's at a wedding, you're seeing something that's not going correct, you're working out the formulas of, can the cake be cut this way so that it fits everybody? So that's the beauty of him, and yeah, I just stumbled upon it because I just couldn't bear to see children in pain.
Great, thank you. First, we have someone who wanted to make her skin perfect, the minister, and someone who couldn't see children in pain. There are many reasons you can all engage in learning STEM subjects. Next, we'd like to welcome Franny.
Yes, hello everyone, and I'm unable to join you in person because I was sitting next to somebody who tested positive and therefore had to quarantine for a few days, get tested, and I'm not positive, so that's the good news, and can continue with life as normal. I got into science. At the time, I didn't know it was science and mathematics because I was quite young, maybe at the age of 5 to 8. And it came about by walking along and listening and responding to questions from my grandfather, who was not very highly educated, but had a very superior mind in terms of asking questions and being open to all kinds of solutions. And so he would ask questions like, how heavy is the animal that walked here? And pushing me to imagine how I could measure the weight of an animal when I haven't seen it or don't have a scale. It came from observing how plants grow, because I was growing up in a rural area. So looking at the tomato plants and how quickly they grow and what makes them produce big fruit. And also because I used to walk to school when I was going to primary school, and it was very rainy and slippery, like in Kigali, very similar terrain in that part of Tanzania where I grew up. And therefore going to school and you slide down the hills and then you have to climb up going home and you are always sliding back down. And that made me aware of friction and principles in physics like friction, which otherwise I wouldn't have observed. So it's really from a very personal experience of growing up in a rural area. And that allowed me, therefore, to understand those principles when I then went to school and got very great affinity to science, because it produces the answers of all the questions that I had. And so my grandfather really is the inspirator behind my going in a STEM journey. Now on challenges, because you asked that question as well, because of the time at which I was studying science and mathematics, there were not many options for young women. One thing I must say to the audience there, you are very fortunate that right now, if you want to go into STEM, basically the only constraint is your will and desire, because there are lots of opportunities and I encourage you really to take them up. When I was growing up, there was only one high school for women who wanted to study science and mathematics in Tanzania. So I was very fortunate to go into that high school. And when I chose to do engineering, there were no facilities for women in engineering because it was a concept that they hadn't even thought about, to the extent that there were no bathrooms for women, right? To that extent that there was no toilet that I could use. I had to go and use the toilets for the people who were more in the administrative services, because they hadn't imagined a woman engineer at the University of Dar es Salaam. Of course, that changed over time, and I'm very proud to say that today, the majority of engineering students in that same faculty that I went to are now young women. And so the barriers are really removable. And the last barrier I had was when we were doing practical training, because we had to work on a site to actually gain practical experience as an engineer. And we were working on a site where I was the only woman on the site. And for my own safety, they had to lock me at night in a caravan and open it in the morning. I couldn't go to the bathroom at night. I had to stay there until morning because I was the only woman on the site. And they thought for my safety it would be best for me to be locked in a caravan. So practically a prisoner at night in order to be able to do practical engineering. So those were some of the challenges, but they have greatly been removed. And I've been very fortunate to have had people who have removed those obstacles for me. And I'll be happy to expound more on that later during our conversation.
Is this on? Okay. Thank you. I'd like to let everyone know at Carnegie Mellon University, we have bathrooms, and even today, please feel free to go upstairs. For women and men, you're well accommodated. So back to the Honorable Minister. What role do you think that policymakers and educators have in driving this mandate for women in STEM?
Thank you. I, first of all, think that, like you say, policymakers have the mandate to set up these policies to ensure that women are able to not be like
Prisoners.
Yeah, not be like prisoners at night, but they're given these spaces where they can become the best and become engineers and doctors and scientists and everything. And I think, in my perspective, setting up a policy is one thing, but making sure that it's put in practice is another thing. And that's where I think the educators come in. I don't know if this is backed by any research, but I know for sure that when women are separated from men, especially in high school, and they are given a space to, grow up and they're in this community and they're supporting each other, we have seen that the results are tremendous. I myself am a product of, an all girls school, the entire high school. Not sure if that was a good thing, but I know for sure, and this probably not backed up by science, but backed up by numbers, by facts. When we look at how schools perform at the national exams, we see many only girls schools that come on top are, eventually girls schools. And we know for sure that this is because whenever they are by themselves, they are supported. Any of the issues that they might face, any of the stigma, any of those is somehow put away, provided that, yes, the educators are also in a good space, and they are supported and they are given that support to really do good. And with that experience, the government has been establishing these, we call them centers of excellence. And there are a number of schools, including girls' schools, that have science options. And all these schools, I know about 10 of them, they always come in the top 15 list of students, of schools that are performing better. And so I think, yes, again, the educators' role should be to give the women, even if it's in a setup that is mixed, but to always have that at the back of the minds that women will need to be lifted up a little bit more and be given that space where they're going to collaborate amongst themselves, because the results when they are working together are tremendous. And of course, be given, again, another space to work with their brothers to ensure that what happened with Dr. Franny is not repeated again. We were given an example of, there's a certain project here that because only men were working on that, and at the end, when it was about to be launched, they realized it did not have no restrooms for the ladies, because yes, again, the same example that was there. So we know that when men and women are working together, somehow things fall in place better than when men are only working by themselves. And so the role of policymakers is to ensure that, yes, these policies are there. It could be the education policies that include the STEM policies, or having a separate standalone STEM policy that ensures, yes, this is given focus, this is backed up by, be it resources, be it partners, but again, executing what the policy says becomes the role of the educators, and the educators at school in a classroom are the ones that have the future of these young women in their hands. And so it's important that they understand how to navigate these different dynamics, giving space to the women, but also making sure that the mix is also possible. Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much. It's really important, the difference between this notion of equality and equity. So when policies or decisions are made, the idea of just applying it universally across doesn't work if there's a group that's marginalized and needs a different extension or different boost to make sure that equality is actually real. So I think to your point is really identifying as educators, how do we fill that gap and not just apply universal policies across. Thank you so much. So I have a question for you, Lucy.
Sure.
Different than that. One of the issues we see in education is there's the issue of recruiting women, which is a pipeline issue that you and I have discussed. But there's the issue of retaining women. And so a lot of what we see when some of our young women start school is this lack of confidence and this fear that they're less than. And you don't suffer from that challenge, Lucy. So
I can't afford to.
So can you share, especially for the women in the audience, what are some coping mechanisms? How did you get to where you are? And how have you navigated microaggressions that you've encountered either in educational spaces or in the workplace?
I laugh because it's a continuing thing. You know, challenges are every day, but staying power is really in your mind. And in the first BIS gig that we had, one of the finalists had such a great solution, and she was studying mechanical agriculture or engineering at the university. And it had the potential to be fantastic, but the pressures of culture had her choose the path of getting married, which there is nothing wrong with that, and being a homemaker. And I always wondered what could have been done different. And so I think the challenges that we face can be overcome when girls and boys are exposed at a very young age to the power of STEM, right from the home. And you asked the role of policymakers, you know, I feel that to whom much is given, much is expected. And if you're entrusted with leadership, you really have to think of all the ways that you can prevent challenges before they come. And so from a STEM perspective, I think the reason many of us come and go is because it's mostly a culture thing. And also the limited role models that we have. We didn't have role models in STEM, which is why we started the Girls in ICT initiative and have really been working the best we can, not perfectly, but the best we can, since 2011. I'm looking at her because she's one of us. And it really is, you get to see the challenges from home. You get to see the challenges from the classrooms. And therefore, it's no wonder that when you get to the workplace, the challenges are there, because this is what people know, and they don't know any different. And the only way that we can know and do different or know and do better starts with, you know, from a policy perspective. So I've stayed because I've had men help me along the way and really soften the landing, because you could be in a room, and in most cases in my space of digital payments, I really am the only woman. And if it is a boardroom on digital payments, I am the only woman. And so to get a word in, to be heard, to, you know, it takes, I don't know what happens. I think it's just God, really. I should say it is God, because it's such an uphill climb. So you stay because the purpose that you're on is much greater. And that really is what keeps me going. And what events like this, conversations like this, the reason why we start Girls in ICT is that girls can see themselves and even bigger things in us by knowing us, what we're doing, how we are overcoming. And it's really, unfortunately, an endless battle until we have every business leader, every government leader, every household leader prioritize women and prioritize these opportunities in such a way that down the road, the challenges that we face that are really stemming from our brothers intimidating us or undermining us or thinking we can't do something is avoided, right? So I want to answer that question from that. It will start from the head of the household, maybe hearing from the village head, who heard from the local government head, who heard from the mayor and the president, to remove that bias, to end that bias, and to therefore make it easier for those who choose to come to STEM to stay. But for those of you who choose, it's really exciting. I never imagined the things that I'm doing now. But because of STEM, I've not had to look for a job since I graduated. I get into spaces, I do my job, someone notices, wants me for whatever problem they are trying to solve. So sheer grit and resilience and a lot of tears can be overcome if you really stay focused on that purpose that you're on, which for me is really the freedom of our continent to be everything that we can be and independent, managing and owning our own monies is why I get up to go do this. So focusing on that makes any challenge really a walk in the park. Thank you.
Do you hear that? You can all overcome your challenges, right? So as I look into the audience and depending on different people's backgrounds, they could say, oh, well, they're ministers, they're this, what about me? And so everyone doesn't start off as the honorable minister. You work hard and you come from different backgrounds. And so I think, Franny, I'll toss this over to you because you spoke about how you started from rural Tanzania where you had to walk to school and you had to have this resilience that Lucy was referring to. In your experience, and you've now since then done some very incredible things that are related in part to STEM, but that basis of STEM has led to different opportunities. Can you speak a bit about what kinds of different jobs students can have when they graduate? I mean, Lucy never has to find a job, as she stated, but for our students who are wondering, I don't necessarily want to be an engineer, but I'm good at math. Like, can you speak to the interdisciplinary nature of your career and how that could appeal to students?
Well, thank you, Bemi. And I'm really inspired by the stories by Minister Claudette and by Lucy, because I have very similar experiences. One thing I can say to everyone in the audience, a young woman considering a career choice, or even a young man considering the same choice and how to support a young woman sitting next to you if there are any barriers, is to think about STEM as the kind of skills that you need to problem solve any situation. And as Africa is still a developing continent, that is very critical. I apologize for the telephone, it's far from me and I can't go to turn it off, but it will go off on its own shortly. We have such huge problems in development that require original thinking and thinking from basic principles. And a STEM education gives you that ability to organize your thinking and structuring of problem solving around first principles. And then the second thing, which is really important about STEM, is that you, by definition, when you look at problem solving in a complex environment, it is multidisciplinary. So what you learn by problem solving in mathematics, in chemistry, in physics, actually allows you to be helpful, and I think Lucy highlighted that, in very different types of situations. And because you learn how to learn, you learn how to investigate, how to ask questions, how to test theories, you actually can quickly jump into a new field and become immediately useful because of that. And then finally, and I think this is really critical, it has to do with the ability to go from a theory to a solution. When you work in engineering, you cannot stay in a sort of single theoretical thought space. What you think about has to be designed, implemented, and stand the test of use. Otherwise, buildings will collapse, bridges will fall, chemistry solutions will explode, etc. Right? So you, as a STEM practitioner, what you theorize has to hold the test of time. And I think that makes it a very useful skill to have, whether you are in business, in finance, in medicine, or in agriculture, or in any of the fields, because you have to take your ideas and bring them to a hypothesis level, a testable level, a prototype level, all the way to scaling up. So for me, that was very fundamental. And I was very lucky to have, just like Lucy and Minister Claudette have shared, mentors. And in my case, they've all been men. The people who have shaped my advancement in the STEM areas and in my career have been men. First, I talked about my grandfather already. I have had a very supportive mother, of course, who gave me, the strength and confidence to go and do different things. But the people who shaped me in taking those risks and shaping the trajectory that I took have been men. When I was studying, doing my dissertation, I had a professor who was supervising my dissertation. And I was at that time very timid and shy. So if you are in the audience and you're a young woman and you are timid or very shy, you can learn from my story. My professor said to me, we had written a joint paper. It was accepted in one of the top journals. And there was a conference in which we had to present the research. So he came to me the day before the conference and said, I'm not going to be able to do it. You will have to go and present the paper. I was terrified. And I went to the conference. There were 1,000 people in the room. And, in those days, we didn't have the technologies we have today. So they had to dim the lights for you to go through your slides that are projected on a projector for everybody to see. When the lights came up, there he was sitting in the back of the room, clapping along with the audience. So it's not that he wasn't able to do it. He wanted me to do it. And the fear that I had to speak in public, to share my ideas in a broad audience, had to be overcome. And he knew he had to throw me out there for me to be able to convince myself that I could do it. So that's the kind of support I got from him. And then another mentor I had later on in my career who helped me actually switch from engineering into finance, focusing on developing countries, then going back into supporting innovative and creative SMEs and getting them the financing they need to succeed, all the way to being able to function in large organizations like the World Bank, the African Development Bank, who actually produce that financing so that these creative ideas have a chance to be taken to scale. And he was there for me as a sounding board, as a person who could point to different ways in which I could think about what I was grappling with, and being supportive in general in terms of dealing with, for example, the disappointments when you go into a room and you don't have support because you come into a culture as a decision maker in a culture where they're not normally used to seeing a woman, and a young woman at that, in that role. And you come back from those missions and you're practically in tears, and being available to support you, pick you up and say, you did it right, you can do it again. Get out there and do it. And I think that was very important. So STEM education allows you really to problem solve, especially in the complex world we are in now with climate risks, having to come up with agricultural transformation to feed the growing population, innovating around how we communicate to bring all these complex, very different ethnic groups speaking different languages. Over 2,000 languages are spoken in Africa. So how to bring all of those in a context where we can share, communicate, so that the continent can integrate its economies and advance all the science and technology we need in order to to bring out the infrastructure solutions when energy transition is taking place at the same time, how to imagine different ways of doing things beyond what other economies have done. All that is very basic thinking by STEM education linked up with finance, good business skills, and of course, political skills. So that's why I think Minister Claudette sitting there with a background in STEM is very critical, because ministers and cabinets have to make long-term decisions. Parliaments have to decide for the next 20, 30 years. And the foundation of those decisions come from very solid STEM thinking, combined, of course, with very strong social analysis and political analysis, and in many other cases, philosophy as well.
Thank you so much. So is it okay now? Great. So thank you, Franny. I think you dated or aged all of us here on stage, because I saw this millennial generation looking confused when you described slideshows and things that they have no idea about. So we'll bring it back to this level for them. One of the things that I heard, I think maybe it was Lucio said, was around to whom much is given, much is expected, the sense of responsibility. And something that Franny mentioned is the fact that, and I think maybe the Honorable Minister talked about this equity and equality issue. So for the men in the audience, you're not forgotten, but the responsibility, and I think what I want to pivot to and ask both of you, since Franny already touched on it, is this notion of this he for she. So up until now, we know men have been in a place of privilege, men have had these opportunities, but we can't do it alone, right? So women who are in the minority are not necessarily the only catalyst for change. So we need men to also participate. What one, can you share somebody in your life who was that catalyst? And two, what message do you have for the men in the audience for what they can do to help drive this? I think through the story of what she said with her advisor who pushed her to do something uncomfortable. 7 years ago, I had just moved to DC, and then for me, it was President Angel Cabrera, who was my boss at that time, and he says, "Can you move to South Korea in 2 weeks?" And I said, "I just moved to DC." And so I was like, I'm a Black woman who doesn't speak Korean. Why does this make sense? He's like, "If anyone can do it, you can." So he said, just go for 3 months and see how that works for you. 3 months turned into 7 years. And so that was who did that for me. And it was because someone who was a male figure believed in me and encouraged me and cleared the barriers and gave me opportunities for advancement. Yeah. So who did that for you, Honorable Minister? And then same with Lucy.
Thank you. First of all, kudos to you for spending 7 years in Korea. In Korea. I think I'll mention two men, particularly. The first one, I think, I am Minister of State, cabinet member, because His Excellency, the President, Paul Kagame, believed in me and believed that there's something in me that could be shared and that could contribute. And so I think there's no greater support coming from a man than that, being given this privilege of serving Rwandans. And the second one is a bit more emotional. Well, you all know what happened in Rwanda, the genocide against the Tutsis in 1994. So it happened when I had started my primary school. I was in primary 1, and I was not the best, when it comes to grades. And so I remember the first term, for those who remember, the genocide started when it had only been 2 terms. We were on holiday, but the first time I went back home, and I think I was like the 22nd, that's the 22nd position, I think, among 40-something students. So Apparently I was in the bubble, distracted, always distracting other students. But my father was very happy, despite that whole, me being the 22nd. And I remember, like any other kid, he took me out, bought me some sweets, Fanta, and I was the happiest kid. The second term comes, and I become the 11th. So like I bumped around 11 positions, and then I became the 11th. Again, my father was the happiest dad alive. I could not understand because other kids were first, second, but me, I was the 11th. And then now genocide happens, and unfortunately, he could not make it. When we returned after the genocide, third term, so he was no longer there. I went back to school, and I became the second. Wow. And I remember taking my report card, and going and, thinking, I wish my dad was here. I wish. And my mom had told us that, all these stories about resurrection. So I thought that he would resurrect. And I remember getting into a fight with my little cousin who had lost both his parents, because obviously right after the genocide, everyone lived at my house. We got into a fight because for him, he knew that there was no hope of seeing his parents anytime soon. But my brother and I were like, no, he's going to resurrect. We know. Like we knew even when he was coming. And obviously, he still hasn't resurrected. But I remember in my mind right there, thinking that was a turning point. That I was going to be the best students. I was going to do the best that I could and become so good. And if you remember, students can remember, report cards always have these biggest subjects, on top. So there's mathematics. If you are doing sciences, then the sciences, biology, chemistry, those are the things that come, the ones that are following. And then music, physical education are always down there. So I made sure that on my report card, like the first subjects, I really maximize and get the best grade there is. And so why did I say this? I think, not knowing, he was the reason that I pursued, the career in sciences, because that's what I was focusing on, making sure that I get the best grades in mathematics and everything else on top of my report card. So 2 men. There are obviously a whole lot of others, throughout, but these 2 stand out. Thank you.
I relate so much to Franny. It's as if I've been following her path. But my thesis advisor at the Kennedy School of Government was an African professor, Calestas Juma. Unfortunately, he passed away. But on my first day, everybody had to introduce themselves, and all these students saying, I've been in the mayor's office, I've done all these things, and here I am. I've just been a software developer. I'm in a public policy school, and I think they made a mistake. And this lady the administrator gets on the stage and says, if you think Harvard makes a mistake, you're probably thinking that, they made a mistake. Just know that Harvard doesn't make mistakes. And shortly thereafter, I met Professor Juma, and he was a scientist. His whole thing was STEM, and he passionately applied it in his village in Kisumu to agriculture. That example and him holding my hand throughout, he became my thesis advisor, and he changed my life. And the other is my first boss in Rwanda, Patrick Nyirishema. I should say Lieutenant Kano, but he was the head of the RDB IT department. And for my thesis, he was my client, because you have to have a real life client solving a real problem. And so my thesis was around how technology can accelerate Rwanda's development. But it became my first job. And on this particular path I'm on digital payments, Rwanda had 0 digital payments in 2010, 0. And he came and he said, well, there's this company Visa that has come into Rwanda. We are competing with 8 countries to see if they could choose us for a pilot for digital payments. You know, you're the only one who has a Visa card here. So can you help us figure out what we need to do? But that was during, again, another role that they entrusted me with to develop the National Technology Plan for 2011 to 2015. So payments became a part of it. We did the research. We won out of the 8 countries to be where Visa would pilot this solution. And that got me on the path of digital payments. And Patrick opened, so he remains a great mentor, but he believed in me. I was barely 30, and to lead a national digital plan from your thesis, that was like, it was just wild. But every time you pay with mobile money or pay with a Visa card, or you don't pay with cash, a man had to do with that, but a woman figured it out and worked with so many people. So yeah, those have been, I think I've played the biggest role. I think about them and I tear up because the lessons that I learned from them have carried me through the most difficult situations. And what I learned here in Rwanda is what I feel like I'm a Rwanda ambassador to the 55 African countries, because I'm essentially trying to build what I learned from Rwanda as far as digital payments are concerned, to ensure that they reach every African in every village so they can access the financial services that they deserve to build and grow and thrive for the continent to stand on our feet. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So I think what we've heard from all 3 panelists, one, we now know the Honorable Minister is a daddy's girl. Secondly, we also know that please do not focus on the fact that she was 22nd in her class. Focus on the fact that she ended as 2nd in her class. So we need you to keep striving, but I think it's a great example of resilience. And no matter where you start, you can still work your way to the top. And now we have her as our Honorable Minister here. So that is another word of inspiration. I think from Lucia and Franny, the fact that there were these people in school, like these role models who were in educators, that's another mandate or a moral imperative for the educators to know the impact they can have on students. And so I know we have some educators in the audience today. A word of encouragement, taking a chance, any of that can really, really impact the lives of the students here. So I want to take a beat from me asking you a bunch of questions and see if we have any in the audience. And anyone in the audience have a question, or anyone online, please pop your question. We have one, thank you. Please introduce yourself before you ask your question.
My name is Ofensa Puti. I'm from Botswana.
Sorry, please stand up as well so we can all see you. Oh, I apologize. Please go ahead.
My name is Ofensa Puti. I'm from Botswana and currently doing my MSIT at CMU-Africa. So I kind of like have many questions, but I will pick I will pick 2 questions for the Honorable Minister. You spoke very elegantly, but I'm really interested in knowing, on a personal note, not as a already being an ICT minister already makes me look up to you. What is it that you are doing to impact the young girl in Rwanda to know that it is possible to be in STEM? And then a question to all the panelists. You have all mentioned that you've been mentored by males. Maybe it makes sense because during that era, there were fewer females, right? So but even at my age, all my mentors are males. I don't have a female mentor. I just want to know, what do you think it takes for women in STEM to actually reach out to young girls, just like the male counterpart are doing? And what are you doing in your space? Can you say there are females that want to be like you or even surpass you that you are actually mentoring right now?
Thank you, great question. Honorable Minister.
I was still writing.
Okay.
I think she wanted to know on a personal note what I am doing to make sure that the work that I do is impacting other women. I wouldn't say I would want to do much, but on a personal level, I try as much as possible to be there for women, for young women like me. So I do mentor quite a number of them. There are some that I take under my wings and, follow and make sure that, they are getting somewhere. But I don't think that's something I can, because I do it not expecting to be recognized for that. I feel like that's my responsibility. But I'm also, like Lucy said, I'm also part of Girls in ICT, which was established to make sure that as a collective, we are doing something that impacts the community. And so we've been doing, the Miss Geeks. She doesn't say it, but she was my mentor at some point. But I think I've graduated, right? Yes, so we do the Miss Geeks competitions where we encourage many women to, pursue careers in STEM, but also compete and earn, some prizes to then apply towards their own solutions and projects. I wouldn't say that we've been successful as of lately because obviously COVID, but as soon as everything, comes back to normal again, I'm hoping and really looking forward to us resuming many of these things. I think that's about it. I would love to do more. I would love to be a part of many other organizations that are doing similar work, but obviously other priorities have come in. but I'm always happy to lend a listening ear, to hold hands of young women and making sure that I'm really trying to at least show them the path. And I do that hoping that they see and they're able to do the same for other women as well. I think I'll let Lucy respond to the other question. Thank you.
I've just remembered that time when we met in the airport, because you urgently needed to talk to me about, we needed to have a mentor-mentee time. Yeah. But as I said, to whom much is given, much is expected. I live my life really striving to be a mentor, one way or another. We started Girls in ICT in 2011, humble beginnings. We did Miss Geek Rwanda with little support from the Ministry of ICT, and I spent my own money to get us started. But that first event attracted so much support for what we were striving to do, which is to encourage girls to come into STEM, and what has transpired later. And it became Miss Geek Africa, picked up by Smart Africa, and we are able to engage and mentor girls in various Smart Africa organizations. The minister and I were pregnant during the pandemic, so she probably doesn't remember. But we did have virtual mentor sessions with the various girls in ICT across the continent. We continued our mentorships the best we can. We've just partnered with a girls' school to Maranyundo to do mentorship. It's just everyday life. But I have to say that it's not the men who reached out, because the mentor-mentee relationship is really mentee-led, where you see if somebody has inspired you one way or another, you go and seek them out. There are also people that they're not our mentors, but we learn from them, we follow what they're doing. And so on our own, we continue to do the best we can within our means and with great support from the government of Rwanda and everything that they do. But even on our own, I know every member of Girls in ICT spends time mentoring even men, right? Both girls and boys. And as we go virtual, I think we have great opportunities. But with my work with Girl Effect, Maranyundo, and really everybody that reaches out to me, I have the responsibility to give them what I didn't have, and hopefully this is a cycle that we continue. I hope you're mentoring your colleagues in Carnegie Mellon and even venturing outside of the university. I think we do the best we can with the resources that we have. And every space I'm in, I really strive to be a good example and offer a word of wisdom or two when I have the opportunity.
Great.
Thank you.
I want to jump over to a question from someone virtual, but I wanted to see if Franny wanted to respond to the question.
Well, thank you very much for the question from the young woman from Botswana. I will be in Gaborone in a few days. Three important things, I think. The first one, of course, because women like us went into STEM, that has removed some of the doubt that women can do it. So I think in a way that's a contribution, because people no longer ask. There are, of course, still pockets where people ask within families and communities, but in general, the question whether women can do STEM is largely responded to because there are women who actually went and did it successfully. Secondly, in my own personal role, there are a number of things that I do. First of all, I teach actually in the social sciences, but using STEM as the basis for my courses. Master's degrees courses, for example, at Sciences Po, when you're looking at very complex issues in the world, bringing in the principles of how STEM can contribute to making good policy decisions, good finance decisions, and good management decisions. So that's a way of encouraging young students to think about STEM as a basis for broader problem solving, regardless of the field of expertise that you eventually go to. Third is actually putting my money where my mouth is. So I have a scholarship program that supports young women who are going into STEM fields, because what happened with me when I got, maybe I didn't tell you this story, but when I was a student of engineering at the University of Dar es Salaam, we had a lecture by a NASA scientist who had come to talk to us about what he does at NASA and the role of research and engineering in general to be able to do space level technologies and solutions for what we can do and learn from space. So I was very shy, but I got up the courage to go and talk to him at the end of his lecture and just asked him, I said, I was very impressed. Where did he study? I'm looking for a place to go for my graduate education. And does he have any advice? So obviously, being an American and coming from MIT, said, there is no other place to study engineering but MIT. It's the best place to go. So of course, I couldn't afford at the time, didn't even know how you apply to go there. He got me the application forms, paid for the application fee, because it was very difficult for me to come up with $20 in those days. $20 in Tanzania was a lot of money, and he was able to pay for me to apply. And of course, I got admitted. And that's my journey of a person who gave the idea, supported the barrier that I had, which is to get the forms and to pay for them. And that allowed me to have access to a world-class education. So I try to do that for other young women whose barrier may be finance or a networking or a reference to be able to be admitted at the top universities around the world in the STEM areas. And then the last thing is actual physical mentoring. I have a large group of people whom I engage with of different age groups to help them think through some of the choices that they have and guide them in the direction of how STEM could be useful for the journey that they are on.
Great. Thank you so much, Franny. So I may be a little biased, but respectfully, I will say Carnegie Mellon University Africa is the best place to study engineering. But kudos to MIT. Secondly, I think what I want you to hear out of this is the fact that it's a two-way street, right? So it's not what, I believe it was a famous American president, it's not what the mentors can do for you, it's driven by the mentee. So if you have the courage, if there's a woman or anybody who inspires you, feel free to reach out, but don't think about it as a transaction. Don't just ask when you need it. It's an ongoing relationship that you have to have. I get many people who reach out to me on LinkedIn and just say, can I have an informational call with you? And I always say yes. So unless you take the chance and you ask, no one is going to know you're in the corner needing this help. So I think what I want you to take out of this from what the panelists are saying is don't be afraid. Find people, seek them out, build a relationship that's long-term and relational. So at any point in life, they could be a help or an asset or connect you to people. And start early. It's never too late. I have mentors I've known for almost 20 years who've been there and I've continued to read. Even if it's a text that just says, hey, was thinking about you, how are you doing? If you only reach out when you need something, that's a transaction. So think about mentorship being, understand there people on this panel are extremely busy. So be very intentional, be very specific about what this relationship looks like. But the power is in your hands to reach out and actually be proactive in getting the kind of support that you need. So this other question, and hopefully someone in this corner is thinking of a question, which will be our last one. But a question that came through, which I certainly don't feel equipped to answer, is one that says, can we give advice on work-life balance and how, and I fail at this, so I will refrain from sharing any poor advice. And how can you, what advice do you have to help women live multi-dimensional lives? So complex question. I will, like a coward, pass it on to the Honorable Minister. Okay, let me pass it on to Lucy this time first.
I mean, the beauty of STEM is it really produces a lot of passion in what you're doing, right? So if you love the work that you're doing, you're not working to live, right? You're living. So it is a live type of balance. That is it's all about wellness, finding balance in any way, whether it is how you eat, exercising, how much you sleep, because sleep is very important, how you manage your money. Everything is about really striving to do the best that you can. So when it comes to work-life balance, time, you must make it a point to have a balanced life. Otherwise, you're not going to be mentally well, right? So we talk about mental health, but there's the mental fitness that leads you to lead a mentally well life. And I think being deliberate in your daily choices of how you're investing your time is important. So you can't be all about work. You need love. You need to give it. You need to receive it. And it can't happen when you're buried into work. You need to explore this beautiful world that God has given us. Meet great people. You can't do it if you don't make time for it. So a work-life balance is planned, it is deliberate, it is a worthy investment that all of us should make, even from a young age. I don't believe in being busy. Again, because I do what I love. This is part of it. I don't feel like I'm going to work every day. But if you are in a situation where you must work to live, make time for fun and to live a little. It's necessary for your success and for your well-being. Thank you.
Thank you. You ready? Okay, so I'm gonna go, Franny, any quick words on how you achieve work-life balance?
I think I'll agree with the first part that Lucy said, which is if you enjoy what you're doing, then work is life. And it's part of the way in which you get satisfaction. But that's not a choice that everybody has. So some people have to work to live. And therefore, being mindful of that, the advice that I would have is, if you can, and I think Stan is very good in that regard, plan your life according to the stages that you're in. So for example, in my case, when I was pregnant and having children, I took jobs that were less demanding in terms of travel. And, you can do research, you can do creative tinkering work. When you're a scientist or an engineer, these are things you can do because the job or the nature of the work allows you to do that. And therefore, those 0 to 5 years, which are very critical for grounding your children, I was able to be at home a lot. And then from 5 to 10, we swapped, and it was my spouse who was responsible at that age to be around and support. And then I could grow my career and travel a bit more and be available for other challenges in the world that I was passionate about. And then you swap again. So if you have a partner with whom you can do that, if you have a family that can support you as you go through those life stages, that's a very good way to do it. And then the other way is what you do on a daily basis, because if you have a very stressful job, coming home with stress is not a very good thing for your family. So being able to have spaces where you can go to de-stress before you come home, that I found was a very useful thing to do, because you want to be able, and of course with COVID and working from home, many families have not had that opportunity, that outlet. And that has created, as you may have seen around the world, a lot of issues around mental health and so on. So it's really raising the importance of that opportunity space to de-stress before you go back into family life. And maybe the last one on life-work balance is if you can, and I think this is the advantage when you're in STEM, if you are creating something that can then be prototyped, that could generate a stream of revenues into the future because you created or invented something, that becomes a very good way, because then in your later years, when you are having children or other responsibilities at home, you will be benefiting from that revenue stream. So I think that's something else to think about when you're in STEM, that is possible. If you see all of these unicorns that have now been developing around Nigeria and Kenya and Rwanda, very soon, I hope a unicorn, maybe there are baby unicorns right now, but some big ones coming up soon. That's happening to very young people, and therefore they are able to balance work and life later on, because you have already generated the support that you need in terms of financial income and income or revenue sources for your future. So I would encourage you, if you're going into STEM, to think about life-work balance in that broad way, because it's a trade-off on your life stage, it's a trade-off on how you see yourself generating revenues, it's your attitude toward work, doing what you love and loving what you do because it makes it easier, and then having a support system, a community, a family, a spouse, or a partner who can help you as you go through different choices and stages. And the last one, de-stress. Find a space to de-stress so that you can come home and be a reasonably happy person to work with and be with as a family.
Thank you so much, Franny. Okay, I think we got a comprehensive answer, so I'll pause on bothering you with that question. And I will see, can anyone in this area have a question? Oh, okay, I'll take two, but if they're quick. One, and then the lady in the back. This gentleman, please.
Thank you. I am Manuel Aishakie from Agazo Shalom Youth Village. This goes to Minister of State in charge of ICT and TVET in Rwanda. Honorable Claudette Irerae. I've heard that you all had different challenges when you were joining STEM, and it's really conspicuous that it was there just to discourage you throughout the journey, but again, you managed to punch that away and move towards your goals. So despite the fact that STEM is being discussed in schools and different institutions, in our communities, there are some of those challenges that are still discouraging young women to join STEM. And how do you think, how are you fighting against those biases? And what do you think should be done so that we can also have synchronization and development of Rwanda? Thank you.
Honorable Minister.
I think that's a very good question. So it's basically asking, you know, for those that are not in these rooms, how does the information gets to them? And I believe that I think it's a collective responsibility for everyone in the room to make sure that once you go back, this is also a conversation that you can spark, you know, within your circles. And secondly, I think we will, you know, this is giving me homework, is to ensure that there are many more awareness campaigns that then go to the, you know, to the rural, to the farthest of the communities to ensure that girls there and the community really, because it's not only girls, it's really everyone, for them to understand the benefits of having more women joining STEM. And I think I am taking it as a homework, but I'm also, you know, giving it as an assignment, students. Let's make it, you know, it's easy. I think it's always easy to always go for the, you know, the easiest thing. You know, you wake up and, you know, getting to that other side of the road, there are so many other things. You are like, okay, what's the shortcut? And so it's easy to do that, but I don't think that this country will get where it wants to get if we all just choose the easiest thing. So it's important that as we discuss, even within our homes, that people start to understand that it's about time that we start looking at this, not as the hardest thing, but as a possible thing to do, and looking at, you know, the gains in the future. Maybe I'll stop here, but further we can discuss and give you examples of the many fields that we need to have. For instance, we're talking about vaccine manufacturing in the country. You know, the kind of skills that we're looking for. When you look at the medical life science, you know, line, if you look at the gaps that we have, then I think if people understood this early enough, and I think we would be getting many people going into that field to make sure that more pandemics in the future, we are ready to fight them. And Rwandans are at the forefront, and we are coming up with our own vaccines. So this was just an example, but I think it's a good conversation to have, and homework for me and really for everyone here to go back and make sure that we do as many awareness campaigns as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Minister. As we all know, particularly relevant here in Africa, it does take a village to make this happen. So we each have a role, the government has a role, but as individuals, we all have a role to help change the system. I know we can continue this conversation endlessly. I know there is one young woman, and so this is me doing my part to encourage. So I'll take one last question from the woman in the audience.
Hi, everyone. My name is Adam Abubakar Umaru from Niger, and I'm a student at the Africa Leadership University. I'm studying computer science. I don't have a question, but a testimony. And I would like to tell these wonderful women sitting there that you have done something very, very good because you have impacted girls without even being in Niger. I'm telling that because I know Latifa Yari, which was Miss Geek 2018, I think. She's such an inspiration in Niger for young women. I led actually a mentorship program, and whenever we do application, we receive a role model, Latifa Yari, Latifa Yari, Latifa Yari, meaning that you guys are working in Rwanda, but you are impacting life, you are impacting young women in Niger, and that's not something, that's a great, great thing. That's why I want people to just clap these wonderful women sitting there. Yeah, and continue doing what you guys are doing, and know that you are not only impacting Rwanda, but you are impacting also young girls around the world and mainly in Niger. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's a wonderful note to end this session on. And so I encourage all of you, based on what you've heard today, you can see the impact it's had on us. When you help others, it also impacts you as well. So it's a win-win situation. We have a networking reception after this. Please take that first step in being courageous and going out there and meeting one of these wonderful women we have in the audience and learning about them and asking and getting this quick power mentoring session now that you have this opportunity. So I really want to thank our wonderful panelists for sharing such great insights and nuggets on things that you've personally done, but steps that we can take, how we can collaborate with men, how to stay resilient, how to really continue to make an impact in our community. So another round of applause for all three of our panelists. Thank you, May. And next, to wrap up this wonderful event, I'm going to welcome Ms. Isa to the podium. Thank you.
Wow, I don't know you, but I've been so emotional, and the last statement made me even more so. Good evening, everyone. I'm Isa Touressa, the country manager of African Development Bank here in Rwanda. I'm from Senegal. I'm half Senegalese, half Malian, but I'm Rwandese. I'm African in general. So distinguished speakers and panelists, dear co-organizer of this event, which is the first one for a series to come, Bemi, the executive director of CMU, Roland, my good friend from the World Bank, country manager, distinguished participants, all protocol observed. You heard with me, I think, the generous statements and messages and stories that our panelists have shared. It goes beyond this room. It goes to Senegal. It goes to Niger and abroad. So initially, I wanted to kind of summarize, right, what was said, but I think that I will not make justice to the powerful statement and the generosity that was in this room and in Tanzania. So I just want to share, I know that this was not part of the assignment, but a personal also story to add to what we shared initially. We are Francophone, as you can guess in my accent. So 4 years ago, my daughter, which she's 18, in the French system, not in Rwanda, but elsewhere, was an E student in math and physics. We moved country, she moved schools in the Anglophone system. And as we speak, she has been accepted in 3 top universities to do engineering in environment. Just to tell that nothing is impossible. You can move from 23 to 11, or an honorable minister to 2, even to first, right? Just to say that nothing should prevent you for having similar journey. So I really want to contribute to the conversations with very few points, because so much has been said on a personal basis. But just to say that as much as we acknowledge that STEM is important, more so now because we experience and see on a daily basis the changing dynamics in the labor force, right? Where STEM is very important, but our collective efforts to make it happen, we have a way to go. So I think that this is my first message. We had 2 years of crazy, with the pandemic, which made our world more digital, right? And when you say digital, it's STEM, right? So I think that which calls for skills, that we need skilled professionals with the knowledge in technologies and then in a science field. And this cannot be overstated. And yet it's in those very field and expertise that we acknowledge and we see, not we acknowledge, that we witness the gender imbalance, right? Which is very unfortunate for different reasons, but I will just tell you two. The first one is, if with this gender imbalance, Honorable Minister and Lucy, you will agree with me that you have a big segment of the labor force, potential labor force, that is denied of contributing, right, to what their role could be if they had equal chance to study and have the career. And that second reason is, to me, an obstacle to the transformation of our continent. We all have a collective role to make it happen, here in this room and elsewhere, in all platforms in the continents. So if half of the potential workforce doesn't have the chance to contribute, this undermines the transformation and the economic growth, socio-economic growth that we want our continent to enjoy. So I believe that we all, and I think this has been shared and said earlier, that we have a collective role, right, to make it happen, right? Individually, at the village level, in our communities, awareness raising, and this is one series among many that will come, but at your change agent, right, in your circles, friends, families, to make it happen. So I believe that in addition to that, in our respective programs, Bemi, you're doing it at CMU, I'm doing it at the bank, African Development Bank, and many other platforms to assure and help women, right, have better access to information, very key, to knowledge, to and in order, right, to embrace and contemplate scientific careers. You can do it, and you will do it. And on our part, African Development Bank, throughout the continent, we had still, and we have programs on skill development, education, technology with regard to infrastructure, for instance, in Rwanda, or transformational digital programs. Just for an example, the first building of CMU has been, the African Development Bank. And as we speak, we have a very transformational program with the University of Rwanda, with the Center of Excellence for Biomedical and E-Health. And we, in the coming years, would want to have a bigger footprint in STEM, and will have a bigger footprint. So I just want to conclude in saying, I've been encouraged to use the sun because I saw everybody else using it, so I would. And just, I think you will agree with me that we learn a lot from very personal stories, very emotional stories, and which will change our thinking, right, about STEM and what are the obstacles, what are the different ingredients that we need. So thank you so much to our speakers for being so generous in sharing your experience and your journey to STEM, and for the careers that you're having, inspiring African ladies throughout. So you will agree with me that we have achieved a lot. So stay tuned. This is the first study of many to come in the coming months. And and the organizing committee that is working on it. Kudos, Benny and your team. I really wanted to thank the World Bank, Roland, my good friend, Bemi, the speakers, Honorable Minister, Franny, and then Lucy, for sharing this story who resonates in some of us. On these notes, and to you, students, for your questions, your interest, and making this first series, which was a trial, a success. We are expecting you for the future one to come. And on this note, I will close this session and thank you very much for making time for 2 beautiful hours together. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you so much, Isa. So I never want to be the one who's in between young people and food, especially students. So I will wrap this up. I just want to say that we would love to commemorate this event. So we're going to next move to a reception. Just our wonderful helpers will point to which direction, but also we would have a roll call for how we'll take pictures. So we'd love to do, we'll start with pictures with the speakers at our dignitaries in the audience, and then we would love to do it by school. And so we can get photos with all our speakers and all the students from the different schools. And if we can, COVID permitting, we will try and do a big group photo that we will then share with your institutions. So thank you all so much for your active attention. Thank you to our wonderful sponsors. Thank you to everyone in the audience. Now, please go enjoy the reception over to the left. Thank you.